Yeah, we're going to get started. So this is the Making Up Parenting Easier, Understanding Your Child's Brain workshop. So I want to talk about who we are. So we are Rocky Mountain Psychological Services. That's who the workshop is put on by. And we offer online services, including child and adolescent counseling, play therapy, psychoeducational assessments, and parenting consultations in Calgary, Alberta. So if you are looking for some more personalized one-on-one support, please feel free to check out our website. We do book sessions online as well. And the website is posted here. It's calgarychildpsychologist.com. My name is Jo. I am a registered provisional psychologist from Rocky Mountain Psychological Services. And my background is in behavioral therapy. So I started in the field of child development as a behavioral therapist. And I learned some really great proactive behavioral strategies. But I came to learn that there's more to behavior than just looking at rewards and consequences. And that's when I became really interested in early brain science. I just recently completed my postgraduate fellowship in infant parent mental health at the University of Massachusetts in Boston. It was a life-changing experience. And I'm so excited to share some of this information with you because I think it's not just doctors, and clinicians and neuroscientists that need to learn about the brain. It's really the caregivers that need to know about the brain. And I know it can be pretty daunting when you hear the word brain science, but hopefully we can make this engaging and fun and understandable for everybody. So enough about me. I want you guys to open up that chat box and I want to learn where you're from. So I want your first name, the city that you live in, maybe your role, maybe you're just a parent or a caregiver tuning in. Maybe you're a teacher or a clinician. So in what capacity do you work with kids? Maybe they're your own. And then the ages of your children or the children that you work with. So I'm going to pause here quickly. I don't know why my chat box is lots of people introducing themselves. So Judy, Calgary, a mom of an 11-year-old. We've got Rue from Calgary, a mom to a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old twins. Caroline, also from Calgary, a mom of a 7-year-old. Nadia from New York. Friends, kids 4 years old and 10 months old. Tasha from Calgary. She's a parent to an 8 and 10-year-old. Tara from Calgary, a caregiver to a 4 and 8-year-old. Sherry from Red Deer, a mom of a 5-year-old. Then we have a mom of 3 girls, 7, 11, and 13. And Tasneem, a mom of a 3.5-year-old with Down syndrome. And Don, father of 12, a 12-year-old male and a 15-year-old female. Okay. That's really exciting to see kind of all the different ages that are popping in here. And a lot of the strategies that I'll be presenting today are useful for all ages. And then we'll talk about how we can adapt those strategies for younger kiddos and for older kiddos as well. All right. Another thing that I really, really want to mention is that this is a judgment-free zone. So you might hear me saying things like, avoid doing this, or we should be doing this. And you're thinking, oh my gosh, like I missed that sensitive window, and you're judging yourself. And that's not what this workshop is about. As parents, as caregivers, we do the best we can with the tools that we have, and hopefully we can add a few tools to your toolbox. So that's really the goal here. So be kind to yourself, especially during this time. I really want to acknowledge that the time that we're in is very stressful, and we need to be kind to ourselves as well. So hopefully we can add some more tools to your toolbox. Okay, so here's the outline of what we're going to look at. So we already did our introductions, but we're going to talk about early brain science. So how does the brain actually work? What are some sensitive windows of development? We're going to talk about building that foundation in the brain. How do we build that foundation? What to expect through the ages and stages, kind of behaviorally, in terms of brain development, how to stimulate your child's brain and optimize the thinking brain. And then we're going to have some time for questions. Okay. And I will periodically kind of check my chat box to see if there are any questions, but right now it's not showing up for me. Okay, so let's talk about the brain. So here's a question. At what age is the brain fully developed? So by fully developed, I mean the brain develops from the inside out and the bottom up. So the last part of the brain to develop is the prefrontal cortex, which is the front of the brain. At what age is this part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, fully developed? And the answer is, so research is saying, now your late 20s, so 25 to 30. And that's some mind-blowing information. We didn't know this like decades ago. But what do we mean by the thinking brain or the prefrontal cortex? This is the part of the brain that is involved in problem solving, organizing, organizing things, working memory, thinking ahead, self-regulation, impulse control. So doesn't that put teenagers into perspective a little bit? This part of the brain is not fully developed. And those skills are called executive functioning skills. Those are the skills that essentially make us successful humans, successful in order to be successful, thriving humans, we need to have good executive functioning skills. We need to be able to plan, problem solve, and organize things. Like really basic functioning, like your heart rate and breathing and sleep. And then we have the limbic system, or the amygdala. And that is the part of the brain that is in charge of emotions, impulses, intuition, and instincts. And this is where that amygdala is. That's a really funny word. But the amygdala is the stress response. And there are 3 different types of stress responses, and that there's fight. So the fight response is any type of physical aggression, verbal aggression, any type of confrontation when we're stressed. Then there's the flight response. So that's really trying to escape the situation, so running away. And then the freeze response, which is the shutdown. And when your brain and your body shut down, you can't take any more information in. So this is a really, really important point, the next point that's going to pop up here. If the child's stress response is activated, the child doesn't have access to their thinking brain to be able to learn or problem solve. So I want you to think about that. And it's not just children's brains, it's our brains too. But if that stress response is activated, you do not have access to your thinking brain. Okay, so the next thing that I want to take you through is Dr. Daniel Siegel's hand-brain model. And I'm going to stop sharing in a second because I really want to show you this. I want you guys to see me. Okay, can you all see me on the screen? I can see the chat box now. So thumbs up or yes. Okay, excellent. So Dr. Dan Siegel, he's absolutely brilliant. If you haven't read The Whole Brain Child or No Drama Discipline, I do list them in our resource section at the end of the presentation. There's some really, really great strategies in his books, but he is the one who came up with this hand-brain model. So I want you all to hold up your hand, and The palm of your hand is the brainstem. So that's that primitive part that kind of deals with breathing and sleeping and heart rate. And then this is your spine. So your hand is your spine. And then I want you to put your thumb in like this. And this is your feeling brain. This is the limbic system. This is where your stress response is. So after this, we're going to hold our brain like this, our hand brain like this. This is our prefrontal cortex. We're going to call this our lid. So the prefrontal cortex is our lid, and it goes on top of the feeling brain, the limbic system. So when our stress response is activated, we flip our lid. We do not have access to our prefrontal cortex, our thinking brain anymore, when our stress response is activated. So we need to be able to put that lid back on so we can have access to our thinking brain again to solve the problem. So how do we do that? There are many ways that we do that, and we're going to talk about that later on. But a simple strategy is, we need to use regulation strategies. So whether it's a breathing strategy or whether it's even moving to a quiet space or listening to music, that's putting your lid back on. And now we can think and problem solve. Now your child's lid is very flimsy. They need your help putting that lid back on. So I want you to think about this. So your child is dysregulated. They're screaming, they're crying, they're having a tantrum, there's some sort of challenges going on. One of their stress responses is activated. So their lid is flipped. And you're coming in there and you're dysregulated. This tantrum is triggering you. And there are two people with their lids flipped. And two people with their lids flipped, that's going to escalate the situation. That's going to bring more chaos to the situation. So the adults in the situation, I know you guys have a big responsibility, but you have to put your lid back on first before you can help your child put their lid back on. Okay, so we want to create calm instead of joining in on the chaos. Okay, and so I'm gonna share the presentation again. So again, that is Daniel Siegel's hand-brain model. It has completely changed kind of how I view behavior and how, like, my own self-awareness. So now I notice when my lid is flipped, and I know that I need to put my lid back on to be able to regulate another child. Okay, so I'm gonna restart sharing here. Okay. So, again, we want to create calm instead of joining in on the chaos. That is really our goal. So if you are looking at this and thinking, oh my gosh, I have really poor emotional regulation, my lid is always flipped, I'm struggling with this, that is okay. That is a very normal feeling every time I run a workshop like this and I ask about, hey, how are your emotional regulation skills? Who struggles with emotional regulation? The majority of adults, of caregivers, will raise their hand. So, we didn't learn these skills consciously when we were little. There weren't curriculums out in school about emotional regulation. So if you are struggling with this, I do also want to say that we do have a self-regulation group for parents. So if you are interested in that, please, you can email admin. Here, let me type that into the chat box before we move on. Sorry. admin@RM Psych Services. Hold on. So if you're interested in that group, sorry, let me type that to everyone. Please email admin@rmpsychservices.com. And then I have a question. What are some tools to help if you are trying to put your own lid back on in order to help your child put their lid back on, but they do not give you the space or time to do so? One strategy is actually stepping away to regulate. And that's okay if you need to step away. and walk out of the room for 30 seconds to regulate on your own before you go in and try to put your child's lid back on. And so we're going to move on. Okay, so how do we build a strong foundation in the feeling brain? So let's talk about a baby's job for a second. So we know that a baby's job is 1, to form a close emotional tie with someone, 2, to explore the world around them, and 3, to learn to regulate their emotions, attention, and behavior. And they cannot do this alone. So they need at least one caregiver who can provide safety and security, who can regulate themselves during stressful situations, who consistently meets their basic emotional and exploration needs, and then provides them with nurturing and stimulating interactions. And the more consistent these interactions are, the stronger the neural connections. So let's talk about brain connections and neural connections for a second. So how do neural connections work? So basically, repeated experiences and repeated stimulation creates stronger neural connections. So if we look on the side here, I have 2 plants. So I want to use this as a metaphor for neural connections. So we have one plant here. It's growing, it's thriving. It looks like it's been stimulated with water and nutrients and sunlight. So it's kind of like a brain connection. So the more stimulation that brain connection or that neural pathway gets, the stronger that neural pathway will be. And then this plant over here might eventually bloom and spread its seeds, and then it'll create a garden. And then this plant on the right over here, this is a plant that has not been stimulated with water or with nutrients or with sunlight, and it is wilting. And that also happens in the brain, and it's a process called pruning. So if we don't stimulate important areas of the brain, then something called pruning happens. But don't worry, because we can also plant another seed and stimulate that seed. So the brain is plastic. So that's the beauty of the brain, is that it's never too late to build new connections. Okay, so here are some examples of how neural connections work, and there's lots of research around this. So an example is more exposure to verbal language builds stronger verbal communication networks in the brain, or more exposure to fine motor activities when you're younger, like beading or Play-Doh or whatever it is, build stronger fine motor skills later on, like printing. Or the more we identify and express feelings throughout the day, the stronger our capacity for emotional regulation. So I have a link here, and this is a link. I'm going to play the video. It's a 2-minute clip, but it's a link to the Harvard Center of the Developing Child. There's lots of really great information on that website, and I do have that listed in our resource section as well. But this is a 2-minute clip that I'm going to play for you.
A child's experiences during the earliest years of life have a lasting impact on the architecture of the developing brain. Genes provide the basic blueprint, but experiences shape the process that determines whether a child's brain will provide a strong or weak foundation for all future learning, behavior, and health. During this important period of brain development, billions of brain cells called neurons send electrical signals to communicate with each other. These connections form circuits that become the basic foundation of brain architecture. Circuits and connections proliferate at a rapid pace and are reinforced through repeated use. Our experiences and environment dictate which circuits and connections get more use. Connections that are used more grow stronger and more permanent. Meanwhile, connections that are used less fade away through a normal process called pruning. Well-used circuits create lightning-fast pathways for neural signals to travel across regions of the brain. Simple circuits form first, providing a foundation for more complex circuits to build on later. Through this process, neurons form strong circuits and connections for emotions, motor skills, behavioral control, logic, language, and memory during the early critical period of development. With repeated use, these circuits become more efficient and connect to other areas of the brain more rapidly. While they originate in specific areas of the brain, the circuits are interconnected. You can't have one type of skill without the others to support it. Like building a house, everything is connected, and what comes first forms a foundation for all that comes later.
Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing there and I'll go back to my presentation, but that just gives a really nice summary of how kind of experiences shape those neural pathways. Okay. All right, the next thing that we're going to look at, okay, so let's talk about sensitive windows of brain development. So over here, it's a scary looking graph, but there are lots of different colored lines, and each line represents kind of a different skill or an area of development. And there are peaks to all of these lines. So where do we see the biggest peaks? The biggest peaks are seen between the ages of 0 to 3. Kind of 0 to 4 also has a few peaks as well. So basically, in these sensitive windows of development, these are really sensitive opportunities where there are billions and billions of neural pathways that are ready to be formed, specifically during this time. But when people look at this, they get a little bit worried and they say, okay, cool, my child is doomed now. So the wonderful thing is that there is a second window of sensitive a second sensitive window of development, and that is during adolescence. So puberty doesn't just initiate a lot of physical changes, but it also initiates a lot of neurological changes as well. So it's a period of vulnerability, but also opportunity. So here we see, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but it's pointing to the first the first years, so 0 to 3. And then the second window is between 9 to 14. Something that's really, really important, and I want to reiterate, is not to ignore the rest of these years. And what this means is that, yeah, there might be a little bit more effort and consistency and support needed during these years to build new connections. But I've seen some beautiful work done between the ages of 3 and 9 and 14 and up. So what does that mean? Yeah, there are sensitive windows in the brain, which means that it's easier to build brain connections during those times. But the beautiful thing is the brain is plastic, which means that it's never too late to build neural connections, even as adults. But it will take more effort outside of those sensitive windows. So that's something to acknowledge. Okay, so what should we expect? Let's talk about infancy and early childhood first. Okay, so impulsivity. So this means acting before we think. So our younger kiddos, and there are a few of you who have some toddlers or some 3-year-olds, they're quite impulsive. So they're not thinking about their actions, they're thinking about how do I get to something that is rewarding, or this looks really cool and I want to explore this, and they're not looking at consequences. Another thing to keep in mind here is that tantrums are developmentally appropriate responses, and a lot of parents don't like to hear that. But what does this mean? One, it means do not fear the tantrum, because that's how power struggles kind of occur. So don't fear the tantrum. It is a developmentally appropriate response, but it also means that they need you to help them regulate. And that kind of mutual regulation, it's called co-regulation. So when you're regulated, it helps them regulate. What else? They make limited connections between their behavior and consequences. So that kind of talks about their impulsivity. Caregivers are their thinking brains. Essentially, you are their thinking brains. So you're constantly creating predictability and structure and routine, and you are co-regulating with them. Another important point is that kiddos in early childhood are egocentric. So that means that they have a hard time understanding what other people could be thinking or feeling. So when it goes back to things like sharing, a kiddo is not, a 3-year-old is, they're not going to think, so when their friend is coming to take their toy, they're not going to think, oh, well, Billy really likes that toy too, so maybe I should give it to him. They're not going to think that. They're going to think, that is my toy. He's being mean. He wants to take my toy. So that's very egocentric. They think about themselves, and that's developmentally appropriate. So we need to help them in that regard too. We need to show them what that looks like to, he really likes this too. So we need to verbally and physically model and communicate that with them. And they need predictability and structure. That's a really, really important point, because predictability and structure creates safety. And when we create safety, it means that that stress response is likely turned off, and that thinking brain is ready to use, with your help, of course. Okay, so we're going to look at school-age children. So with school-age children, they can start making some connections between their behavior and consequences. So this is great for when you're sitting at home and you're planning family rules together. So they can help you plan family rules together. Their thoughts are concrete. So that means that they need very clear expectations. So when you say something like, okay, I need you to have a good day. I mean, in our heads, we can probably come up with what a good day could look like. But for a kiddo under the age of 12, this can be very difficult. So what the heck does a good day mean? It needs to be very specific. So a good day means you finished your homework, you put your backpack back on your hook, you put your trucks in the bin. Like, it needs to be that specific. So think about kind of how you're responding to kids that are that age. Are you being that specific with them? Again, they need predictability, structure, and routine. Yeah, for that sense of safety. And if things are predictable, and we're talking about things like transitions, that's where we see a lot of tantrums and dysregulation. If things are predictable, it's a lot less likely that they're going to flip their lid, and that stress response is going to get turned on, and then they're able to use that thinking brain with you. So they still need support with regulation from caregivers, but if you practice skills with them, they can start using coping skills independently as well. So that's really exciting to see. Okay, and if we look at adolescents, so they can have complex abstract thoughts and reasoning, and then they can make really great insights and connections around their own behavior. And they're articulate, and this is where we forget that they still don't have a developed prefrontal cortex either. So just because they're expressive and they can have this abstract thought, one thing that they do have is a high social gratification and reward centers. So those reward centers override their ability to look at consequences and think ahead. So that really explains kind of drinking and driving, or skipping class to hang out with friends, or experimenting with substances at parties. So they're not thinking at consequences or looking ahead. They're thinking, how can I meet that social gratification and that reward center? So really clear expectations still need to be set, even in adolescence. And then we know that their executive functioning skills are not fully developed, but they can also independently use coping skills. They must learn and practice these skills first to build those neural pathways before they can use them, though. Okay. So let's talk about strategies to stimulate and optimize brain development. So we're really getting into the meat of the strategies that we can use with our kiddos at home. So I want you to ask yourself, do I have routine and structure in my home? And again, be kind to yourself, because this pandemic has really messed with everyone's routines. So if we don't have the day perfectly structured, don't beat yourself up over that. But maybe focus on your morning routine, or maybe your bedtime routine, at least to start creating that sense of safety or predictability. So we know that predictability increases safety, and the sense of safety optimizes use of the thinking brain, and it also strengthens those executive functioning skills that make us successful adults. So how can we implement this? Visuals are amazing. They're super helpful. We have routine charts that we can use, even a simple visual like that is presented in this slide. So just having that up on the wall so that they can see it. Hey, this is what our morning routine looks like, or our bedtime routine looks like. I use this all the time. It's called a first then board. So draw out, even on a whiteboard or a piece of paper, this is what you're going to do first, and then this is going to happen. Visuals are fantastic. Okay, transitional warnings. As adults, we know exactly what's going to happen in our day, or we have control over most of what's going to happen in our day, but we control every aspect of our child's day. Okay, transitional warnings. So super, super important. Like I said, as adults, we all have our days kind of planned out. We know what we're going to do after this workshop, or we have an idea of what we want to do. We have control over what we want to do after this workshop, but we are controlling pretty much every part of our child's day, from meal times to schoolwork to bedtimes. So letting them know what happens next is a really nice way of reducing anxiety in between those transitions. So I'm going to give you an example of how anxious we could be if we didn't get a transitional warning. So I want you to imagine yourself hanging out with a friend of yours, your spouse. You're having a picnic in the park, and it's a beautiful day, and you're eating maybe a delicious cheesecake, and then all of a sudden your friend turns to you and says, "Okay, I'm done. I gotta go." And you're thinking, wait, what? Like, you didn't get any type of warning. I don't get it. But as adults, we have the ability to stop and think and ask your friend, are you okay? Well, what are we going to do next? So kiddos, they don't have that prefrontal cortex yet to stop and say, no, mom, I want to keep playing. What are we going to do next? I'm confused. So instead, when they hear, okay, playtime is done, boom, they flip their lid. They don't know what's happening next. There's anxiety there. And then they have a tantrum. And that's why going from like a really high preferred activity like playtime to cleaning up or to sitting at mealtime is really, really tricky for them. So transitional warnings are fantastic. I like to sing a song, 5 minutes left to play before we put the toys away. It's a signal. It's a signal. Using timers is an excellent strategy. Again, it gives them a signal, like a tangible signal that lets them know that there's a transition coming. So do you use transitional warnings? Do you use visuals? Do you set up routines? Planners and calendars are excellent for school-age children. Checklists are really, really great. I was in a session today and with an 11-year-old girl, and she had little stickies with checklists of things that she had to do, and then she had to bring the sticky back to her parents when she completed kind of her tasks. So she had these little missions and tasks to do throughout the day. Yeah. Okay. Creating family rules and consequences together. This is another really great way to help build your child's executive functioning skills, their problem-solving skills. My first question is, do you have family rules? Are they written down? Do you have clear consequences, both positive and negative, for those family rules? So yeah, write them down. It's really great if you have a visual on the wall with very clear family rules, and you can just point to it. Oh, what's rule number 3? What's happening? Uh-oh, we're breaking rule number 3. We're jumping on the furniture. Remember, we keep our feet on the ground. Oh, right. Okay. And it's just a nice little prompt or reminder. I've had children as young as 4 offer suggestions for family rules, like very reasonable suggestions. So if you sit down as a family and say, okay, what are our family rules today? Or sorry, not today, but what are our family rules? Let's talk about family rules today. No hitting. Oh, that's a great rule. Okay, so always pair the no rule with a do rule. Okay, so the don't rule with a do rule. So as you see here, so number 1, no hitting or hurting. We use gentle touches. Of course, we're going to start with simple but specific rules. We're going to try to make sure that these rules are utilized throughout the entire family. So you're following these rules yourself as a caregiver as well. And it's amazing if you're consistent with your communication around these rules. The moment that your child says, hey, Mom, rule number 2. Oh, okay, no yelling. It's really reiterates and validates that the communication around those rules has been working. Once they catch you breaking a rule, hey, Mom, number 2. Mom, number 4, rule number 4, you're breaking rule number 4. You're mad. You're in the red zone. So, of course, rules will change throughout the ages and stages of development. We're going to revise them often. So take a look at your family rules every 6 months, every year, and you'll start getting more specific rules, especially for like adolescents. And there will be rules about curfew implemented, and there will be rules around social media implemented. And parenting, it's really interesting. I always get asked, hey, what's the golden ticket? What's that golden ticket strategy? Unfortunately, there is no golden ticket strategy, but there is a golden foundation, and that is 1, consistency, 2, creativity, because we're constantly having to change and revise strategies as children get older, and also self-awareness. So looking at your own triggers and looking at how your own responses as well. Yeah, so rules will change throughout the ages and stages, and then have children to plan family rules with you. It really helps provide a sense of autonomy and control, and a stronger likelihood that they're going to follow through with those rules as well. So make sure that when we talk about consequences, make sure that they're reasonable and related to the behavior. So if we look at something like no hitting or hurting, and the 7-year-old hits the 5-year-old, when we're talking about consequences, we're not going to say something like, okay, you hit your sister, you don't get your iPad for 21 days. That's not reasonable or related. So say they're hitting their sister over the Paw Patrol toy. They want the Paw Patrol toy. The consequence is we're going to sit until we're calm and in the green zone, and then so the Paw Patrol toy is done until tomorrow, so we can choose a different toy. So that's a more reasonable consequence than saying, okay, you don't get your iPad or your screen time for a week. Yeah, and looking at consequences, I mean, it takes a lot of problem solving and it takes a lot of creativity. So if you need any support around that, we can absolutely help you in that as well. So book a parent consult if you need one. Okay, here's another strategy. These are very, very simple strategies, but they're so powerful. Identify and talk about feelings daily, and not just the comfortable feelings. So if a child can't express their feelings, how are they supposed to be able to identify them? And if a child can't identify them, how are they supposed to be able to cope with those feelings? So this is a really, really important thing to keep in mind, especially the messaging that our culture is giving to us and our children. So what kind of messages do we hear about expressing feelings? We hear things like, suck it up, you're a big boy, you're a big girl. We hear things like, toughen up, big boys don't cry. My partner, he works as a strength and conditioning coach for hockey athletes. And he works with 16, 17, 18-year-old boys. And he'll notice that when a 17-year-old boy who's playing hockey, and he'll notice this so many times, every day he has a new story for me. When things don't go their way, they will break their hockey sticks, they'll whip them across the ice, they'll storm off the ice swearing, they'll get into fistfights. And when we look at kind of their foundation, and when they were younger, what were the messages that they were told, especially in that field when they're starting off and playing hockey? Suck it up, you don't need to cry. So it's really important to know that all feelings are okay, even the uncomfortable ones. So if your child is able to, so what I want to say is the feeling is okay, but we can set limits around the behavior. So it's okay to be angry, it's okay to be upset, but it's not okay to hit. So we want to validate the feeling, let them feel the feeling. And the goal is that we practice calming strategies or coping strategies throughout the day. And we're going to talk about that in a second, so that they start using them independently instead of screaming or throwing things. But the first step is talking about feelings. Yeah, so you can still validate emotions while setting limits around behavior, and be mindful of the messaging that we're getting. And we even hear it in the Wheels on the Bus song. The babies on the bus go wah, 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 and the mommies on the bus go shh, shh, shh. Like, you don't need to cry. I'm not telling you to change your kid's favorite song, but because they love that part, but just be mindful of the messaging and that it's okay to express feelings. And it's important to model that as well. So saying things out loud like, okay, mom's really mad right now, she needs a break. So I'm really upset, I'm really frustrated right now, I need a break. So model your own feelings, and then also help your children identify their own. Okay. Next strategy is practice and model calming strategies throughout the day. So this brings us to the first question. What are your calming and coping skills? What are your own calming and coping skills? How do you express anger and frustration? How do you regulate yourself? Are you throwing things? Are you yelling? Are you slamming doors? Are you running away from the situation? And be mindful that the coping strategies that you are modeling, your child is going to see. So again, with that being said, if you struggle with your own emotional regulation, we do offer support. Please reach out to us. We're happy to help. But here are some coping strategies that you can start implementing for yourself and for your children. And be mindful that everyone is unique in how they regulate and de-escalate. and which coping and calming strategies work for them. So breathing, meditation, yoga, and mindfulness are really, really great. There are some really great apps out there that you can download. One is called Smiling Mind. It's excellent for both you and your children. Cosmic Kids Yoga is excellent. There are some really great books out there that kind of teach different breathing strategies for kids. Breathe Like a Bear is one of my favorites. So there's different, like an example of a strategy, breathing strategy that you can try teaching your child is cookie breathing. So you have a cookie, you place it in your hand, you're imagining your favorite cookie, it's freshly baked, so you smell it, it smells really good, and then you blow on it because it's very hot. So there's lots of really creative ways to engage your children in these breathing exercises. And when they are upset, something to keep in mind as well is when a child's lid is flipped, we definitely do not want to teach these coping or calming strategies mid-tantrum or while their lid is flipped. Remember, if your lid is flipped, you don't have the capacity to learn. So if you're trying to go in and say, here, let me teach you cookie breathing while they're screaming, that's not going to work. So be mindful of that. It's also important to teach these strategies when your child is calm throughout the day. So we're not going to teach mid-tantrum. We're teaching these strategies throughout the day. Going to a calm, quiet space. That is absolutely okay. If your child is running into that space, into their tent, into their room, and they're telling you to go away, that's okay. We can honor that. Okay, all right. When you're calm, when you're ready, you can come out and we can try to solve the problem together. Even just stating the feeling out loud is a regulation strategy. So talking out loud is so if your child starts talking, it means that they're regulating. It means that they're engaging their thinking brain again, that prefrontal cortex. So just saying, I feel mad, or I'm really upset right now is a calming strategy. Taking a drink of water, again, your children cannot eat or drink if they are engaged in that feeling brain, right? So if their lid is flipped, they don't have the capacity to stop, think, pick up a glass of water and drink it. So that is regulating. So that's bringing their thinking brain, that's putting their lid back on. So taking a drink of water is a good strategy, listening to music, movement. Like I said, everybody's strategies are going to differ, including your own. So like I said, think about your own strategies, and maybe that is moving to a calm, quiet space before you can engage with your child. Okay. This is a strategy that I also want to talk about. It's called collaborative problem solving, and you can do a whole other workshop on actually all these skills on calming strategies, emotional regulation, collaborative problem solving. But I just want to give you an idea of what this looks like. And so basically, when your child is experiencing a problem or a challenge, or maybe they're dysregulated over something, there are three responses that we as parents go to. One is the my way or the highway kind of route. So say it's time to clean up. They say no, they start screaming, that's the problem. The my way or the highway route is kind of like, we're cleaning up, that's it, or go to your room. So you're setting the consequence immediately. You're kind of, you're enforcing what you want to enforce without validating them or letting them know, or giving them an opportunity to problem solve. Then there's the kind of walking on eggshells route where, so your child is upset over cleaning up, and then you're like, well, that's a problem, but I don't want to deal with it today. I'll deal with it another time. So it's the more passive route. So we're either kind of my way or the highway or passive, but we want to find a nice in between. And that's collaborative problem solving. So the first step to collaborative problem solving is empathy. And empathy does not just mean the ability to cry during sad movies. Empathy is much more than that. Empathy is putting yourself in the other person's shoes, even when the emotion is uncomfortable, even when they're angry with you. This is very, very difficult to do. It's very, very challenging. So it's validating the other person involved, and it's also validating your own emotions and saying this out loud. So, hey, I know you're really mad that we have to clean up right now. I get it. But I'm frustrated because it's time for dinner. I'm frustrated as well. It's time for dinner. So let's define the problem together. And we just did that. So you don't want to clean up. You want to keep playing with this toy. Like this Lego toy you really like this toy. I can see that. How do we come up with a solution together? So give them an opportunity to define the problem and the solution. And of course, this varies with every age and stage. With kiddos under the age of 6, you might have to define the problem, especially if they don't have the verbal skills to be able to do so. But kids, typically 5 and up, if you ask them, hey, what's wrong? Can you tell me what happened here? Once they're regulated, they can give you an answer, typically. And if they don't give you an answer, then you help define the problem for them. And then you try to come up with solutions and an invitation to problem solve. So, okay, so you really like this toy. You don't want to put it away. It is time to put it away. So you're still following through with the limit. But what can we do with this toy? Well, maybe we should put it up on the shelf and then I can play with it before breakfast tomorrow. Okay, that's a great solution to the problem. So let's do that. And then you move on. So you're still following through with your limit setting. So you're still going to clean up, and then you go and transition to the next activity, which might be dinner time or whatever it is. So again, empathy. So validate your emotions and your child's emotions and regulate first. So that's really important as well. Then define the problem together, and then come up with solutions together. And it's much more likely that, again, they're going to follow through if they have a say in this whole process, in the whole problem-solving process. Okay, stress. Let's talk about stress for a second. Again, we know that this is a very stressful time for everybody, including ourselves. And another thing that brain science tells us is that prolonged activation of the stress response impacts brain development and affects learning. So if that stress response is constantly activated, it's going to be very difficult for children to complete their schoolwork, or for kids to complete their chores or tasks. So how do we mitigate that stress response? This is really tricky. And also, I also want to let you know that if that stress response is activated, we might see some regression during this time. So this is another important point. So if you're seeing kiddos kind of having more of those tantrums, or whining more, or not wanting to sleep in their own beds, or going back to an old, like, soothing toy that you thought that you could get rid of a long time ago, it's because this time is really, really tricky for everybody. Their routines have changed. So a significant change like that, like this global pandemic, can really ignite that stress response and activate that stress response. So again, all of these strategies, creating structure, predictability, routines, talking about feelings, practicing coping strategies throughout the day, these are really nice proactive strategies that you can use. So again, let's talk about your stressors. What are your stressors? And it's important to know that if you're feeling stressed, if you're feeling dysregulated, your child is feeling that too. And of course, our stressors are different than our children's stressors. And this is going back to empathy as well, and keeping your child's mind in mind. Something that, stresses you out or stresses your child out might be very insignificant to you. And I had a parent give this example earlier, and I thought it was so beautiful. And she said, it's funny because when we order a coffee and we get given the wrong coffee order, we're allowed to be outraged. Like, we are livid. But then if we give our kids the wrong color plate and they throw a tantrum, it's ridiculous. So our kids have their own stressors, and in their world, that color plate is really big to them. But in our world, it's significant. It's insignificant, sorry. So paying attention to that. So our child's stressors can be different than our stressors. And how do we mitigate those stressors? So we talked about all of those proactive strategies before this. But one thing that I really want to reiterate here is that it's okay to ask for support. And it's really tricky during this time to get support from, you can't just call up your network. You can't just call up, your mom or your dad or your neighbor and say, hey, come over, because everyone's in quarantine. So this is a very, very stressful time for everyone. So it's okay. Like, if you need to call a helpline or the distress center, if you need support from, again, like we are here to help you as well. So counseling services, all of our services are online, even for a single parent consultation to help give you more of a customized plan for you. It's okay to ask for that support. Yeah, let's see what, oh yes. Okay. So another really, really important thing to pay attention to. And this is also what brain science is saying right now, is that we are all wired for connection. So I want you to ask yourself, how are we meeting our child's need for connection every day? So we are wired for connection. We know this. So whether that's playtime, game time, a movie night, book sharing, what is your way to connect with your child every day? And let me tell you, getting down on the ground and playing with your child for 15 minutes can sometimes feel like a workout. It can be exhausting, and it's okay to feel that way. But it's kind of like starting a new workout routine, like an exercise routine. There are going to be days where you're going to say, oh, like, I really don't want to do this. But if you do it every day, and if you make this kind of a lifestyle or a part of every day, you will notice differences in yourself and your child. And in terms of their level of cooperation, it's much more likely that they're going to respond to directives if they get that need for connection met throughout the day. And that might mean setting a timer for 10 minutes and getting on the ground and playing with them. That might mean, just having like something scheduled daily. And here's another really important point is, so there's also another need that our children are wanting to have met, and that is the need for power and control. So connection and power and control. So how do we meet our child's need for connection, and how do we meet our child's need for power and control? I want you to ask yourself that question every day. Did I meet their need for power and control and connection? So that might mean taking your child's lead during play. That's an excellent way to meet your child's need for power and control. and think of it like you're a sports commentator if you're playing with them. So, oh, you're picking up your Lego right now. Oh, now you're picking up the red truck. Oh, geez, they're crashing now. So giving them that power and control during their play can really, really meet their needs for connection and control. And again, life is going to be easier for the rest of the day if they have some of those needs met. Another way to meet your child's need for power and control is giving them choices within limits. So if the limit is it's time to sit at the table for dinner, we can still offer them choices. So we can say, okay, which color plate do you want? If the limit is it's time to clean up, we can still give them choice in that. So we can say, okay, do you want to put your trains away first, or do you want to put your Lego away first? Okay, screen time is almost up. That's the limit. Do you want 5 minutes or 10 minutes left? So they get to choose. So you're still setting a limit, but you're giving them a sense of power and control. So it's much more likely that they're going to follow through with that limit as well. Okay. So going back to all of our strategies, we went over routine and structure and transitional warnings. And we went over identifying your own feelings and your children's feelings and letting them express big negative feelings. We went over practicing calming strategies throughout the day. It's huge because it's something that maybe we haven't done before, and maybe we weren't even aware of our own coping strategies. Yeah. We talked about collaborative problem solving, so making sure that we validate our own emotions and our children's emotions and regulate before we try and define the problem together and solve the problem together. We talked about mitigating stress and just being aware of our own stressors can really help optimize our children's brain development. Because if we take care of our own stressors, then that means that we're more available to help our children regulate as well. And yeah, quality time and connection. This is a really, really important strategy as well. And it really can help optimize your child's brain development and make them feel safe and heard and connected and give them a sense of that power and control. So I'm going to end it here. And I wanted to end with this quote. So it says, every child deserves a champion, an adult who will never give up on them, who understands the power of connection and insists that they can be the best that they can possibly be. And thank you for joining this workshop. And it really shows that you are trying to add some more of those tools to your toolbox. And thank you for being those caregivers for your kiddos. And I'm going to open it up to some more questions in the chat box. So now I can actually see the chat box. I'm going to stop sharing the presentation. Before I do that, this is the resource page. So if you want to take a picture of that, we have some books by Dr. Dan Siegel that are highly recommended. So The Whole Brain Child, No Drama Discipline. These are really, really great books if you want some more tangible strategies. And then there's the Harvard Center on the Developing Child, has amazing resources and videos around understanding early brain development. And also so does the Alberta Family Wellness Initiative. So we, as a province, are really front runners in getting this early brain science out to everybody, out to the public. And there's a free certification. It's called the Brain Story certification, and it's very intensive. So if you have some extra time, by intensive, I mean there's a lot to it. There are many modules, but it's free, and it's a really, really, really great resource if you want to learn more about the brain. Does anybody have any questions? Does anyone need, any questions? Just type them into the chat box. I'm happy to wait around and answer some of those questions. If you don't have any questions, thank you so much for joining this workshop. And if you need support, again, please check out our website. I'm glad that you enjoyed the workshop. If there's anything else, any other questions that are coming up. If not, feel free. Thank you so much for joining. It's a beautiful day out today. Oh, resources. Oh, okay. Well, any of the resources, yes. I can get, so those resources shown in the presentation, I can email to you guys. How does one reason with a 2-year-old? That's a good question. Because their thinking brain is so underdeveloped, we have to be very creative with our strategies, and it's more about modeling and about being proactive with a 2-year-old. There is a Taming a Tantrum workshop for that we're hoping to put on here soon, and it deals specifically with the younger kiddos, so the 0 to 6 kiddos. And if you're interested in that, we'll get that sent out to you. Okay, I have an 11-year-old girl who really struggles with telling me how she's feeling. It all comes out as anger. So it sounds like she, a goal for her would definitely be emotional regulation and working on some strategies. And if you need some support around that, again, we want to be proactive. So we want to talk about these strategies during the day when they're calm and not when they're, when that anger is showing. But we can definitely support it, like if you need to book a consultation, we can definitely help you with that. How much can teachers be exposed to learning during the day for a 12-year-old? I'm trying to understand that question. Awesome. That question. So are you, I wonder if you're trying to ask how much like online learning can they be exposed to during the day? How much learning can children be exposed to during the day? Okay. So that is that's definitely depends on your child's kind of cognitive capacity, their regulation, their level of focus. It's so different, and that's why. And now with this new modality, it's very different. So how much online learning can they be exposed to? I don't know if anyone else wants to answer that question, but I think you'll know. I don't know if I have some child psychologist or school psychologists up on here.
It's gonna be hard for parents to do.
Okay. So it's very, very dependent. So how much learning can children be exposed to during the day for a 12-year-old? Even during a school day, we know that the full 6 hours is not just lectures. So there are very hands-on applicable activities. And like I said, it totally depends on your child's level of focus, concentration, regulation. And if your child is struggling with their levels of concentration and regulation, we can definitely help you out with that as well. Just email admin@RM Psych Services or check out Calgary Child Psychologist. How does anxiety play into some of the things we talked about today regarding regulation? Does it enhance it, or is it a completely separate issue? That's a really great question. So anxiety is related to the stress response, absolutely. So if anxiety is related to an overactive stress response, it can affect emotional regulation. Absolutely. So it's definitely not a separate issue. And I know a lot of anxious children have challenges with their emotional regulation and with coping with their anxiety. So, but yes, anxiety, is often a result of an overactive stress response. And it doesn't necessarily mean that, there's an active trigger in the environment. So it's not just like, okay, it's time to clean up and you're going to flip your lid. That's more related to emotional regulation, but your child's level of anxiety can definitely affect emotional regulation. Absolutely. They are related. My school said it's about 2 hours of schoolwork per day for a 12-year-old, if that helps the other question. I don't know if I do have a child or a school psychologist on here if she wants to answer this question. I'm not sure how much schoolwork per day is recommended, especially with this current situation. It's so different. Okay. Okay, so Ashley is a school psychologist, and she says what I've been hearing from other families is it's about 1 hour for early education and 2 to 3 hours for upper education per day. So that's the expectation per day. Okay. Okay, and then I have, oh yes, but not all at once. So that's a good point. Okay. And then I'm not sure, Jason, if this is a question. So I encourage her to journal, but she never fills me in on what made her mad. See, I just love technology. Hey, I wish I could just have all these questions asked in person so I can get some clarification. But I mean, we do the best we can with this new technology. Okay. Sure. Okay, let's unmute Jason. Hi, Jason. Oh, is it Jason?
Yeah, that's my husband's email.
Oh, hello.
I'm like trying to think, oh, is this what he means? So I was trying to respond back, and then I had another comment to what I was typing. I'm like, oh,
yeah, no. It's very tricky to kind of gauge what people are asking right now in a chat box. So this is much better. Did you have a question?
So I was just gonna say, with my daughter and her emotions, it's like, it's so hard to figure out if she's mad at me, mad at things in the past, mad at whatever, because she's just mad, and then she won't talk to me. And then
how old is your daughter? How old is your daughter?
11-year-old.
Okay.
But she does have emotional regulation issues.
Yeah.
We see Cassandra, so.
Oh, that is awesome. Okay, yeah, it's really, so that's really tricky when you can't identify the trigger right away, and that's when it's really important to do behavioral data tracking. So if she has this meltdown or she's angry, how are we tracking this? So what happened right before? What happened right after? How did I respond? It's so important to track because once we track, we kind of figure out different patterns that we see in the data. So maybe it's like she's having this tantrum every night, or not every night, but it happens a lot, at around 8 p.m. before bedtime, or it happens a lot in the mornings. And so what is happening right in the morning that is kind of triggering maybe some anxiety or emotional regulation challenges? And how can we be proactive? So how can we, if we know that it's going to happen in the mornings, or it's happening during a specific trigger, so it's when you limit screen time or whatever it is, so how do we create success around that? What kind of proactive strategies can we use so that she doesn't kind of have that reaction? And yeah.
I could see she's right now, it's really like a roller coaster.
Mm-hmm.
And I try and get her to like the journal, like just between you and I, like no judgment journal, let me know, leave it under my pillow. And then just, it's never what happened then. It's like feelings that upset her from the past.
Okay.
So it's, I don't know, we're working on it.
Yeah, it's tricky. I like to do like so I have a checklist that I use, and it's like a 3-hour, every 3 hours there's a check-in. So like from 9 till noon, 12 till 3, 3 to 6, 6 p.m. until bedtime. And during those time slots, we do like, here's your checklist. Hey, just check off. Did your lid pop off, or whatever language you use, right? Did you get angry? Did you use a calming strategy at this time? What triggered your anger? And so I like to do it specific times during the day and get them involved in it. And that can help as well. It's really
okay.
tricky. Yeah.
Good, thanks.
Yeah, no problem. It doesn't look like there are any more questions, so I'm going to sign off. Thank you guys again for coming, and I hope that you received some tangible strategies from this workshop. And if you need, I'm going to put my email in here as well. If you need, joanna@rmpsychservices.com. If you need some resources around kind of how to plan a routine, or you want some more structure within your day, or you want a list of the resources that were in this presentation, please feel free to email me.